Dan Hardy, brilliant to speak to you for Sky Sports. How are you feeling? I guess 6 weeks or so out from the boxing match.
I'm feeling really good. Yeah, I'm feeling really good. It's nice to be seeing my cheekbones again after a couple of years of not being in training camp as well.
And what you're making 185, is it? So that's kind of 15 pounds above your regular fighting weight. Does it feel pretty comfortable?
Yeah, it feels very comfortable. I mean, I'm normally walking around about 10 pounds heavier than that anyway. About 195 is my natural walk around weight. Similar to when I was fighting at 170, to be honest. We just take out the hard diet and the weight cut at the end. But I'm planning on walking on the scales without, doing any weight cutting. So I want to be, I want to be healthy at 185.
Beautiful. And how does the conditioning vary for a boxing match than an MMA match? And obviously there's technique that's going to be very, very different. But in terms of the fitness, does it vary with the length of the rounds, etc.?
It does, yeah. I mean, it's a very different pace. With mixed martial arts, as soon as the range closes down and you're clinched, you've still got elbows and knees and wrestling to deal with, and then it hits the ground and it continues. So, a 5-minute round in mixed martial arts is a ferocious pace, even when there's not very lot happening. With 2 minutes in boxing, and knowing Diego Sanchez as well, it's going to be a ferocious 2 minutes. So I'll be needing the minute rests in between, but it's just very different. It's far more, far more explosive, much more faster paced. The referee will be separating us if we clinch at all. So I'm excited for it. It's going to be a ferocious 15 minutes for sure.
What's your relationship with boxing going back? 'Cause I know you started MMA really young and did boxing training a bit later. But what's your sort of relationship with the sport as a fan and as a participant?
Well, I mean, coming from a Taekwondo background, which is predominantly kicking, when I started training and competing in kickboxing and Muay Thai, I needed hands. So I started training with a lot of boxers. And I was fortunate that around the time, there was the likes of Jawed Khalik, Carl Froch was around at the time. And I used to get good training sessions alongside those guys at various gyms. And there were a couple of good amateurs that I used to travel around with as well. Ricardo Sams, who used to box alongside Amir Khan on the England squad. So he took me around to a few gyms, and I've had some really, really good boxing lessons over the years from some of the greats. But now putting that into practice, at this point in my career is a very different thing. And Diego's not a boxer either, though. So, it's going to be a different kind of challenge as well. It's trying to predict what he's going to come with is half of the battle.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. You mentioned Carl Froch, because I wondered about that connection with the Nottingham background as well. You're kind of perfectly matched size-wise, aren't you? He fought at 168 in boxing, you at 170. What was that like going up against the Cobra?
Well, I mean, to be honest, it was just it was an amazing experience. Just any time he was around training, even just working alongside him on the bags, that the power that he would put through the bag rig. I'd be there kicking and punching the bag as hard as I could, and Carl Froch comes in, starts landing these left hooks, and the whole room feels like it was shaking. Obviously, always a great boxer, and what he used to do in Nottingham for the crowd was amazing. Great inspiration for me when I was coming through as a fighter.
Yeah, it'd be good to see him in MMA as well. Actually, you could have persuaded him to come over. Maybe it would have been an interesting competitor.
He'd be all right, I think he'd be all right with it. Yeah,
he's a strong guy. What about Ricky Hatton then, fighting on the undercard of two-weight world champion Hatton, British legend, against the Mexican legend Marco Antonio Barrera? What does that mean to you?
It's that for me is one of the most special things about it, to be honest. Of all the boxers that I watched over the years, Ricky Hatton stood out as one of my top few that I always used to try and emulate. I used to copy his body shots best I could, and even just the watching his training sessions and his fights to get me motivated for training. So to be able to share a card with him, to sit at a press conference with him, and I've been to train at his gym as well, in the last couple of weeks, and it's amazing. I mean, the pace that he sets is incredible, and the strength of mind that he's got, and the motivation that he has to get in shape. I mean, you will have seen over the last couple of weeks the amount of weight that he's dropped. He looks incredible, and he never really lost his speed, to be honest. His footwork's always been there. Even when he was a lot heavier, watching him on the bag, he still moves very, very well. And of course, Barrera, he never got out of shape. He looked great at the press conference, and again, one of my favorite boxing matches ever, Barrera against Nassim. It was a lesson in basics, which is what I really liked about that fight. So to see them both together, and knowing that they're good friends, but they're motivated to have a really hard battle, it's going to be a privilege to share the card with them.
Yeah, it's gonna be a brilliant night. I want to ask you about the weight stuff with Ricky as well, because obviously he was famous for blowing up. And on the UFC front, where you cut your teeth, I know the fellow Brit Paddy Pimblett's getting a few knocks at the moment. The baddie for his weight inflation between fights. What do you make of that? The different approaches, like you said, you're at 195, but there are fighters in boxing and MMA who blow up a lot bigger than that in terms of distance from their fight weight. How do you assess that and the long-term effects, or is it a psychological thing that some people just need to walk away and kind of indulge for that period?
You know, I think there is a big part of it is like a pressure release, you know, and obviously Ricky used to put himself through a lot in his training camps, sacrifice a lot, diet hard, train hard. Paddy does exactly the same thing. I mean, you know, the shape that we saw him in ahead of UFC London, he looked incredible. And I know that his nutritionist works hard to get him in that kind of shape as well. So for Paddy, it's probably just he's enjoying the moment. You know, he's a young kid and he's in his early 20s. He's being invited to baseball games and basketball games, and I'm sure everywhere he goes, people are trying to feed him stuff. I think, to be honest, you know, in the next couple of years, I expect him to settle down a little bit. You know, I've seen the same thing with Molly McCann, you know, his teammate. You know, she was the same in her first couple of fights with the UFC. She's really settled down. She's stayed in shape. I think Paddy will do the same, but he's living the high life at the moment. I mean, there's nothing like being 2-0 in the UFC, let me tell you that. He is a superstar right now.
Well, you know all about it. And I want to ask you about this because we often speak to MMA fighters and we speak to boxers at Sky Sports. And there's always the grass is greener on the other side. But you've been quite outspoken about this being an exhibition match for you, that you're making a big payday relative to what you made in the UFC at the height of your exploits there. Is it getting better for MMA fighters? Because it seems to be blowing up, doesn't it? UFC London's coming up. It seems there's more people taking that path. Do you feel it's not remunerated enough? What's your take on it?
I mean, the thing is, the UFC is such a powerful promotional machine that if you sign with the UFC, even if you didn't get paid to fight, you would probably make more money fighting there than anywhere else in mixed martial arts. I mean, boxing is just a very different animal. You know, you get your pay from the fight. With mixed martial arts, you know, the UFC relies on you making your money elsewhere. And let me tell you, what the UFC are paying Paddy and what he's making on a monthly basis don't even compare. You know, the opportunities that have come his way since he's got the UFC platform have been incredible. You know, he's making lots and lots of money, but not from the fights. That's the crazy thing about it. And what's even more disappointing in my eyes is that he's not making a great deal more than I was making, 15 years ago. You know, we've not seen that incremental increase in fighter pay, which we really need to be seeing, especially with the likes of Paddy. You know, if you look at the numbers that he does, the attention that he draws, the money that he's actually making for the promotion, it's only fair that some more of that starts to trickle down. And I think it will get there eventually. You know, fighters are getting smarter, managers are getting smarter, people are getting more demanding and more aware of what their value is. You know, like Francis Ngannou, heavyweight champ, knows what his value is. You know, he's getting 600,000 and Tyson Fury's making 20, 30 million. You know, there's a big difference, and it does need to be rectified, but it's a slow and gradual process, but we are getting there.
Yeah, I suppose it's just a cut of the pot, isn't it? I think people have said that even Bellator, I think, is it 43% of the total money in the franchise goes to the fighters, whereas with UFC around 19%. Would you just like to see that needle shift up a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's even lower than that. The last time I checked, I think it was around 11 or 12% of the UFC's revenue, especially when they've got, you know, it's the big sponsors that come on board, you know, that like the cryptocurrency sponsors and the alcohol business. It brings in millions and millions of dollars that just doesn't touch the pockets of the fighters. That's really where the UFC make its huge money is the you know, the sponsorship aspect, and that's where the gap is between what the UFC make and what the fighters make. It should all be cut into the same pot really and shared out, but it's not quite there yet.
Well, it's great that you keep talking about it, and I think banging that drum, and people like Francis Ngannou as well, the pioneers like yourself, and even people like Mark Weir, I think, is still talking about the finances side of it, which is fantastic. They have got that option of the crossover fights. You're doing that now. Technically, curious how that works for you from a taekwondo background, because I've spoken to Matt Skelton in the past, who was fantastically successful in boxing in his 30s after switching from Muay Thai and kickboxing, but he said he'd always get flack from his boxing trainers about his stance and where his weight was. He wasn't grounding his feet enough in boxing. Is that a big change? Are you able to train MMA at the moment, or do you have to focus solely on the boxing?
I've always been very good at switching disciplines. You know, I'll be training MMA on Monday morning with the team, you know, just because I enjoy doing it. But the stance for boxing is very different. And for whatever reason, when I lace the boots up and put my gloves on, my brain changes into a different mode. So I go slightly longer stance, a little bit more side on. you know, my style does change, but it's adaptable based on the rule set. You know, if I went to Muay Thai, my stance would be very short and my guard would be high. I would just adapt to whatever rules I'm fighting under. And I like the challenge, to be honest, of switching. You know, I've fought kickboxing and MMA on the same night before. That was a bit of a challenge, but, you know, switching one set of gloves to the next seems to help my brain.
Yeah, at least you don't have to worry about wrestling this time, which is nice. But is it the left hook is your weapon, is it? I know from the UFC days that was something you used.
That's the one that got me my knockouts in the UFC. Yeah, it's been my most damaging punch. But I've been working a lot on my right hand. And obviously, you know, Diego being a southpaw, it does open up the right hand possibilities a lot more than the left hook. So we'll see. I'd like to think I can use both hands, but the left hook might do the job in the end. Yeah,
a bit like Dillian Whyte. That's the fabled sort of left hook in British boxing at the moment. What do you make of Conor McGregor saying that he kind of almost plans to alternate? I think we caught up with him at Sky at the Monaco Grand Prix, just as you can imagine that Conor was out there. He says he's going to alternate. But when you look at that lightweight division in the UFC, is it possible that high level to have boxing matches and then UFC fights?
I think it's very difficult, especially given the fact that everybody wants to fight Conor McGregor, no matter where they are in the rankings. You know, this is what gets him into the big marquee fights without going through the ranking process, is because he's such a big draw. You know, he's such a huge name for people's records. But then, you know, you go from boxing to mixed martial arts and back and forth, and you have to keep changing things. Energy systems change. You know, the process of preparing has to change. Plus, you know, you're taking some of your focus off the grappling. And if you've got the likes of, you know, Islam Makhachev, who's fighting, you know, who's following in the footsteps of Khabib, and obviously Charles Oliveira, if you've got people like that are spending 100% of their time working mixed martial arts, it puts him at a real deficit. I mean, of course, he could do it if the opponents are right. But if he wants to be a champion in the UFC, that needs his entire focus. Yeah, I don't think Charles Oliveira is going to have a boxing match with him anytime soon. It's not how it's going to play out. Dan, tell us about, before you go, why we should tune in then, because it's Diego Sanchez. I know in the past, apparently, he's been upset by some of your analysis in terms of you calling him like a crowd pleaser and a bit of a berserker. What do you expect? Do you expect him to go berserk on you in this one? Oh, I think he's going to try and hurt me. Absolutely. I don't expect anything less from Diego. You know, even if we were sparring, it would be full contact and he would be trying to take my head off. You know, we've always kind of clashed a little bit. You know, I always felt like we were on a collision course because we were on the UFC roster around the same time. I always seemed to rub him up the wrong way for whatever reasons. And I made a comment about the fact that he's kind of thrown his you know, common sense and logic out of the window a few years ago to to please the crowd. But he's a wild man. You know, you just don't know which version of him is going to show up. If he's calm and calculated, he's a very difficult puzzle to solve. If he comes out wild, then it's a case of me keeping my guard up and my chin down until the storm has been weathered, and then seeing what targets I can open up on him. But no matter what, it's going to be an absolute banger. And, you know, Ricky Hatton against Barrera in the main event, I mean, I can't wait to be sitting ringside for it. It's going to be an absolute honor to watch those two legends throw down.
Yeah, and that great heavyweight fight, Hughie Fury as well against Michael Hunter, I think at the same venue on the same night. Dan, been a pleasure. Best of luck with it. Thank you very much.